Britain in the 1950s was learning how to smile again. The war was over. Factories roared back to life beneath gray skies. New housing estates stretched across the suburbs. And for thousands of ordinary families, the dream of owning a motor car suddenly felt possible. A driveway, a seaside holiday, freedom beyond the railway timetable. But some of the cars trusted with those dreams became unforgettable disappointments. Behind polished chrome grills and optimistic showroom promises were machines plagued by rust, weakness, cramped engineering, and embarrassing unreliability. Cars that stranded families on rainy roadsides. Cars that emptied wages, already stretched thin in post-war Britain. And some damaged far more than reputations. These were the 10 worst British family cars ever sold in the 1950s. At number 10 was the Ford Popular 103E. When it arrived in the early 1950s, the little Ford looked reassuringly familiar. Its rounded pre-war styling, upright grille, and narrow body felt comforting to families still recovering from years of rationing and hardship. Powered by a tiny 1172cc side-valve engine producing barely 30 horsepower, it promised affordable motoring at a time when affordability mattered more than glamour. And initially, people adored it. The Popular represented entry into a better life. Fathers proudly washed them outside newly built council houses, children squeezed into the back seats for summer trips to Blackpool. It was simple, cheap, and unmistakably British in spirit. But simplicity soon became misery. The brakes were weak, the cabin felt cramped, even by the standards of the time. Heating was almost non-existent during brutal British winters, and the ancient engineering already felt outdated before the decade had properly begun. Long hills exhausted the engine, overtaking felt dangerous. Families often traveled in nervous silence while lorries thundered past on narrow roads. Worse still, many owners realized they had purchased a car that belonged to another era entirely, and the next entry would feel even more hopelessly trapped in the past. At number 9 sat the Morris Oxford MO. On paper, it looked respectable, solid, dependable, the sort of car a careful middle-class family might trust completely. Introduced shortly after the war, the Oxford carried conservative styling, with soft curves and gentle chrome touches that suited Britain's cautious optimism. It became popular among school teachers, office managers, and small business owners trying to rebuild stable lives. Yet beneath its respectable appearance was a painfully sluggish machine. Its 1476cc engine struggled badly under load, especially with entire families and luggage packed inside. Journeys that should have felt exciting became exhausting exercises in patience. Country roads exposed the Oxford's lack of power mercilessly. Then came the rust. British winters and salted roads quietly destroyed these cars from underneath. Wheel arches dissolved, floors weakened. Owners watched once proud family saloons slowly rot away outside terraced homes and suburban garages. For many buyers, the disappointment felt personal. This was not just transport, it was a reward after years of sacrifice. And what came next managed to combine unreliability with outright embarrassment. At number 8 was the Austin A90 Atlantic. Few British cars of the decade arrived with greater ambition. Austin wanted glamour, export success, American influence. The Atlantic arrived covered in chrome, sweeping lines, and confident styling, clearly inspired by Detroit optimism. It even offered electric windows. In 1950, that sounded extraordinary. Families saw the Atlantic as sophistication on wheels, a glimpse of Hollywood elegance parked beside rainy British pavements. Beneath the bonnet sat a 2,660cc four-cylinder engine, producing around 88 horsepower, respectable for its time. But the reality was painfully awkward. The styling felt oversized and clumsy to many British buyers. Fuel economy was dreadful. During a decade when every shilling mattered, reliability issues emerged quickly, and handling the heavy Atlantic through narrow British streets became tiring work. Worse still, Americans rejected it entirely.
Austin had built a car desperately pretending to be something it was not, and owners could feel that insecurity every time they struggled to park it or pay another fuel bill. But at least the Atlantic looked ambitious. The next car barely looked finished.
At number 7 came the standard Vanguard Phase 1. The Vanguard symbolized post-war utility above all else. Introduced in 1947 and continuing strongly into the 1950s, it abandoned elegance for blunt practicality. Its bulbous shape and high roofline prioritized space and simplicity. Powered by a 2088cc engine that delivered dependable but uninspiring performance, for many families it was simply obtainable, and in post-war Britain, that alone mattered. The Vanguard became common across growing suburbs, often carrying entire families through rain-soaked holidays and overcrowded city streets. But owners quickly discovered its flaws. Steering felt heavy, gear changes were awkward, build quality varied alarmingly between examples. Then there was the styling. Even by the standards of the era, many found it deeply unattractive. Children nicknamed them flying potatoes. Owners joked about them nervously in pubs, while quietly worrying about repair costs and mechanical faults. Still, compared with what British families suffered next, the Vanguard almost seems charming. Because number 6 became a national frustration, the Hillman Minx, Roots Group, marketed the Minx as modern, stylish, and dependable. Throughout the 1950s, it evolved constantly, adopting sleeker, American-inspired lines and more fashionable interiors aimed squarely at ambitious young families. For a brief moment, it worked. The Minx looked contemporary, parked outside cinemas and suburban semis. It represented aspiration without extravagance, a sensible step upward in life. But owners soon encountered persistent problems. Electrical faults appeared constantly. Water leaks soaked interiors during heavy rain. Rust attacked aggressively around sills and doors. Engines developed worrying noises far too early, and the repairs never seemed to end. Families who had stretched finances to afford a newer, smarter car often found themselves trapped, paying endless garage bills instead. Weekend drives became tense affairs, filled with strange rattles and nervous glances at temperature gauges. Yet somehow things would become even less dignified. At number 5 was the Wolseley 444. Wolseley had once represented quiet prestige. Doctors drove them. Solicitors admired them. Their illuminated radiator badges gave them a faint air of old British dignity. The 444 attempted to bring that dignity into the modern age. Styled with graceful lines and powered by a modest 1250cc engine, it offered leather seats, polished wood trim, and respectable comfort for middle-class buyers wanting sophistication without the price of a Jaguar. But underneath, disappointment lingered everywhere. The engine felt underpowered for the car's weight. Acceleration was painfully slow. Suspension comfort vanished on rough roads, and reliability concerns steadily damaged owner confidence. Many buyers expected refinement. Instead, they received mediocrity wrapped in polished trim. And that hurt more, because families were not only buying transport, they were buying status, respectability, the feeling of finally moving upward in British society. The next car destroyed that feeling completely. At number 4 came the Austin A40 Somerset. Even when new, the Somerset looked strangely old-fashioned. Its swollen bodywork and heavy curves resembled something from the 1940s, surviving awkwardly into a faster, sharper decade. Still, buyers trusted Austin. The company had helped mobilize Britain through war and recovery. Families assumed reliability would follow naturally. Powered by a 1200cc engine, the Somerset delivered modest performance and reasonable practicality, but driving one could feel exhausting. The steering wandered badly at speed. Body roll through corners was alarming. Fuel economy disappointed. The suspension crashed harshly across uneven roads, turning holiday journeys into uncomfortable endurance tests for entire families squeezed inside. And then came the corrosion. Rust devoured Somersets with astonishing speed. Owners watched paint bubble and metal weaken within only a few winters.
Many families simply could not afford constant repairs, forcing them to keep deteriorating cars on the road far longer than they should have. But Britain's next failure would become far more infamous.
At number 3 was the Rover 75. Today, the name sounds elegant. In the 1950s, it genuinely was. Rover marketed the 75 as refined motoring for successful professionals. It carried stately styling, luxurious interiors, and a smooth 2.1-liter straight-six engine producing around 75 horsepower. To many buyers, it represented a rival into Britain's respectable upper middle class, and for a moment, ownership felt wonderful. The cabin smelled of leather and polished walnut. The ride quality felt serene compared with cheaper rivals. Families traveled in quiet comfort through misty countryside roads, believing they had finally escaped austerity. Then the costs arrived. Maintenance proved painfully expensive. Fuel consumption alarmed owners already facing economic uncertainty, and repairs demanded specialist attention many garages struggled to provide. The Rover became less a family car and more a financial burden disguised as elegance. For some owners, the shame of selling them quietly became part of the experience itself. Yet the car at number 2 suffered from something even worse: humiliation. The Morris Marina's reputation belongs mostly to the 1970s, but its spiritual predecessor in failure arrived much earlier, with the Morris 6 MS. Large, ambitious, and intended to compete with more prestigious saloons, the 6 carried a smooth 6-cylinder engine and generous proportions that initially impressed British buyers, hungry for comfort after wartime deprivation. But the reality collapsed quickly. The heavy body overwhelmed the chassis. Handling felt vague and unstable. Mechanical complexity created endless reliability issues, while fuel economy became almost laughable for ordinary households. Owners often found themselves stranded beside steaming bonnets, while neighbors drove past, staring sympathetically. The embarrassment lingered long after the repairs were complete. And then there was number 1, the car many families wished they had never trusted at all: the Vauxhall Velox. The Velox looked magnificent in showroom windows. Long chrome lines, broad American-inspired styling, a confident 6-cylinder engine producing around 54 horsepower. In gloomy post-war Britain, it felt optimistic and glamorous. That glamour sold thousands. Families imagined modern futures behind its large steering wheel. Fathers proudly parked them outside cinemas and dance halls, believing they had finally achieved prosperity. But ownership quickly became exhausting. Fuel consumption was punishing, steering felt cumbersome, build quality disappointed badly, and mechanical faults appeared with alarming regularity. The heavy body strained components relentlessly, creating breakdowns that many owners simply could not afford to fix. For working and middle-class families already balancing mortgages, rationing memories, and uncertain incomes, the Velox became something painfully symbolic, a dream that cost too much. And perhaps that is why these forgotten cars still matter, because they were never merely machines. They carried Britain itself through a difficult decade, through rebuilding, through ambition, through the quiet determination of ordinary families trying to create better lives after years of hardship and war. Some succeeded, others failed spectacularly. But all of them became part of Britain's roads, its suburbs, its rainy holidays, and its changing identity. Today, many survive only in faded photographs, rusting barns, and distant childhood memories. Yet for those who lived with them, these cars were unforgettable. Not because they were the best, but because they revealed how fragile hope could sometimes feel beneath polished chrome and showroom lights. And perhaps somewhere on an old British street, beneath gray skies, one of them is still waiting quietly behind a garage door. If you remember any of these cars, or if your family once owned one, share your memories below. And if you enjoy exploring the forgotten stories hidden inside Britain's motoring past, consider subscribing, because the next journey takes us into the British cars that almost destroyed the companies that built them.